Famed attorney Sidney Willens had been slinging law lingo in Kansas City, Missouri since before anyone can even remember. Found himself wading through knee-high weeds with a client at 207th and State Line Road in Johnson County, Kansas. None of his life choices should have brought him to where he found himself to be on that hot and steamy late September day in 1978. But his client, John Campbell, was up to his eyeballs in the wild and woolly world of outlaw motorcycle gangs. Out of his element, Sidney Willens approached a highway worker with a very unusual request. "Can you help us find a dead body? We have outlaw motorcycle gangs, wild parties, drug-fueled sex romps, depravity, murder, an awful lot of arson, and a woman that tried to dig up a grave not once, but twice to bury a fake fur coat with her honey. Welcome to Missouri."
Damn, it feels good to be a gangster.
The body they were looking for was that of 22-year-old Miss Karen Ann Keaton, who had disappeared about a month before from the Blue 7 Lounge in Grandview, Missouri, which is just south of Kansas City. At the time, Grandview had a population of about 25,000 people, but crime was off the charts. Now, when it comes to crime, Missouri is no rookie, but Grandview, Missouri is the MVP of crime. Now, if you're curious what was going on the flip side of the state in St. Louis, Missouri, the OG of crime, peep this video. Now, the suspects in this murder weren't your run-of-the-mill bunch of crooks and bullies. Nope, they were like brothers from another mother, born and bred in the shady subculture that had this dangerous allure to it. What brought these folks together? A shared love for Harley-Davidson bikes and a liking for the drugs and the alcohol. They called themselves outlaws. Neat. Okay, so the rundown on these motorcycle clubs, or MCs. In the 1960s, the U.S. saw a rebellious youth scene emerge from the Civil Rights Movement and anti-Vietnam War sentiments. Youngsters ditched tradition and embraced hippie fashion and experimented with drugs. As the Vietnam War ended, disillusioned veterans returned to a country they no longer knew. Feeling ditched by the powers that be for a war they didn't sign up for, a lot of these vets sought the unity and the camaraderie that they had in the service. They found solace in these outlaw biker gangs. Forget the system and societal norms. The biker life was all about brotherhood and unity. Now, most of these biker gangs are cleaner than a brand new whistle when it comes to their rap sheet. They just like to play outlaw on the weekends. They show their loyalty to their clubs with tattoos or by wearing their club colors. Then, Monday through Friday, they can unclog your toilet or prepare your taxes. They're called outlaws, not necessarily because they break the law, but because they don't meet the American Motorcyclist Association standards. Now, there is a subculture of that subculture of the original subculture. These rebels aren't just about breaking the AMA rules, they're about breaking all the rules. There's much macho posturing and a little too much love for the bottle and the substances. And of course, the charming way they denigrate women. It's like a bad 70s sexploitation film. Welcome to the new millennium, fellas. And like a biker game of who wore it better, the colors, the patches, and even the way they set up the clubs with presidents, secretaries, treasurers, it's very confusing for outsiders, including the police, to tell the difference. Now, these clubs value their independence, and they ride their cruiser bikes, like their Harley-Davidsons and their choppers. And they say they stand for freedom, which is strange considering all of the murder and kidnapping that we're going to be getting into in just a minute. And of course, loyalty within their biker community. However, the Department of Justice sees these outlaw motorcycle gangs turning their clubs into hubs for criminal activities. The DOJ calls them OMGs. OMGs. In Australia, they're called bikie gangs. And no disrespect, my dad is from Australia, but why do they give absolutely everything a cutesy nickname? Brekkie, the Barbie Grill, what else? Live free or die. A lot of these clubs participate in charity events, some say as a way to appear squeaky clean. But hold on to your handlebars. In 2005, a firefighter was loading up donated toys at a toy drive in California when he was shot when members of rival motorcycle gangs who organized the event started shooting at each other. What the hell? Get your shit together. Thankfully, the firefighter wasn't badly injured and recovered, but it's not likely these do-gooders will ever get another fire truck to show up at one of their events again. They burned that bridge, so to say. The grand poobahs over at the American Motorcyclists Association are shaking their heads like disappointed parents at a teen party, grumbling about how these outlaw clubs are wrecking the motorcycling image for everyone else. And I can't say I blame them, because that Toys for Tots craziness would not be the end of that tomfoolery. On December 6, 2014, at another Toys for Tots event in Decatur, Texas, some members of the Bandidos motorcycle gang beat up a member of the Cossacks motorcycle gang. See, the Bandidos were the head bitches in charge in the Texas drug trafficking game, but they'd let you operate freely if you paid them a tax. Well, the Cossacks didn't want to pay. Not much for the free market, the Bandidos. So about a week later, 30 Bandidos busted into a bar called Gators Jam Inn, and they started shooting up the place. They dragged out 41-year-old Jeff Brady. They dragged him outside and executed him in front of his wife and all of his friends. The reason? Brady's gang, the Ghost Riders, didn't show the president of the Fort Worth chapter of the Bandidos, Henry Wayne Baker, then 62, enough respect. Listen, Henry, you can be the juiciest peach in Georgia, but not everyone likes peaches. Maybe he can noodle on that while he's serving his 45-year sentence. Meanwhile, the kids are just like, can we just get the toys? Leave your situation at the door. Don't need no hateration or holleration. I'm just saying. So all of these events culminated on May 17th, 2015 at a Twin Peaks restaurant in Waco, Texas. The shootout erupted at a regularly scheduled regional meeting of the Texas Confederation of Clubs and Independents, which is the statewide biker club coalition. Now, on that agenda was a discussion of political issues regarding the rights of motorcyclists. Things like safety and motorcycle awareness campaigns. I mean, the irony. Unfortunately, the meeting never kicked off. Very much like an episode of Beverly Hills 90210, a Brenda Walsh versus Kelly Taylor style hissy fit began over who gets to wear the Texas bottom rocker patch. But the Bandidos and the Cossacks, well, they brought guns. A shootout erupted in the parking lot. They were shooting at each other. They were shooting at the cops. 9 bikers were killed and 20 were injured. Although all the fatalities and injuries were from gunshot wounds, there were weapons like chains, brass knuckles, clubs, knives, and batons. Now that is a melee. Nearly 200 bikers were arrested, but at the end of a story that's too long to tell here, there were 0 convictions. There were a lot of protesting bikers claiming that many of their arrests were just wanton government overreach, and they're just bikers, not criminals. Sure, to keep the peace and the bikes standing upright, authorities have tried to ban motorcycle clubs from charity events or slapping restrictions on their club colors at these gigs. Regardless of all the drug trafficking, murder, and looking stupid at charity events, motorcycle gangs calling themselves the one percenters, meaning the 1% of motorcyclists cool enough and cruel enough to be true outlaws. These gangs are deeply ingrained in American culture, much like our beloved baseball and apple pie. Their songs, movies, TV shows, they're practically canonized. Maybe it's their rebellious nature or their tight bonds of brotherhood. Maybe it's their swagger and the pride over that 1%er patch that others find so alluring. Although you can get one of those 1%er patches over on Amazon. Might want to tidy that up, boys. I mean, I don't really get it. I'm not much of a joiner, and I don't really care about meth or motorcycles, but whatever floats your goat. Find your lost remote. Now, although you'll hear stories like those previously mentioned, and not just in Texas or California either, but Canada and the UK, they're everywhere, these outlaw motorcycle clubs usually talk the talk about avoiding violence. But when push comes to shove, they don't hold back on the brutality. The FBI's National Gang Intelligence Center says that although outlaw motorcycle gangs, or OMGs, are only a sliver of all gangs, 14% of law enforcement professionals said that an outlaw motorcycle gang was the most problematic gang in their jurisdiction. 11% said that outlaw motorcycle gangs were the most violent type of gangs in their jurisdiction. With many veterans joining these outlaw gangs, the 70s saw a surge in their numbers, and Kansas City was a key hub for the Missing Links gang. But it didn't take long for the Missing Links to quickly expand their influence into multiple states. Now, wherever motorcycle gangs rev their engines, trouble isn't far behind. As these clubs multiplied like rabbits, they turned to low-level drug dealing and other shady activities to make some cash and flex their muscles. But as their numbers grew, so did their need for more money, more power, and to stay relevant. Conflict was hot on their tailpipes. They dabbled in a little gun smuggling, some blackmail, thievery, beatdowns, but a lot of it was kept on the DL, so the general public wasn't really even aware of it. The Missing Links motorcycle club that terrorized Kansas City, Missouri in the 1970s was certainly no exception. The Missing Links was originally started by Billy Dean Clary and some of his motorcycle riding buddies back in 1966. And although that seemed harmless enough, it quickly took a sharp left turn into the dark alleyways of organized crime. Then in 1974, the president of the Missouri Missing Links, Lucky John Bedgood, was kicking back in the woods with some of his club buddies and his 16-year-old child bride. And listen, marrying a 16-year-old was not cool even in 1974, even in Missouri. They stumbled upon two unsuspecting fishermen in Warsaw, Missouri. The fishermen, Harold Massey, 23, and Edward Cunningham, 19, started to feel a little outnumbered and a little skittish. So they made up an excuse, gathered their stuff to bounce, but then Bedgood and one of his friends, known as Creeper, asked the two if they'd be willing to drive them around and look for firewood. Now, feeling a little intimidated, Massey and Cunningham agreed. But when they got to a spot where they could collect some firewood, Bedgood and Creeper got out of the truck. So Massey floored it, and in my opinion, accidentally hit and killed Bedgood. Now, the state disagreed with me and tried to pin a murder charge on him, although he ended up just convicted of manslaughter. Still, who is his attorney? Even the passenger, Cunningham, got hit with a second-degree murder charge. Insanity. Now, Bedgood's funeral was an event. It got more press than there is glitter in a strip club. 200 people showed up, and there was a mile-long procession of 50 motorcycles escorting a 1954 Cadillac to the cemetery. The mourners then decked out the casket with the appropriate biker bling, like knives, chains, and beer cans. The loss of Bedgood, though, would be tragic to many more people than just the 200 mourners that were at his funeral. After Bedgood's passing, George Clifford "Tiny" Mercer would tap in to usher in an era of violence and brutality. Mercer was born to be wild in 1944 to Mr. and Mrs. Charles Mercer. Later, Mercer claimed that his mom was also a biker. Mercer also claims that she put him in an orphanage. But this guy lies all the time. Still, Mercer came in 4th place at an international science fair hosted at Kansas City. Maybe taking 4th place as a snub, he quit school in the 8th grade. His first brush with the law happened in 1949 when 5-year-old little Georgie brought his dog Whitey to school, where the dog proceeded to nip a couple little girls. If that was not foreshadowing, then foreshadowing does not exist. Years went on, and he ended up doing concrete work and was described as hardworking and reliable. But that really wasn't George's get down. He had been living the biker lifestyle since he was a tot. he became a prospect, which would be like a fraternity pledge, in the Rancid Riders, which was like a farm team for the Missing Links. Mercer found his calling with the Rancid Riders Motorcycle Club. This outlaw biker life became his oxygen, his reason for living. Not only did he get the Rancid Riders patch tattooed on his back to prove his loyalty, but he took a pair of pliers and ripped out his own teeth. I'm not sure if that shows devotion to his club or a dislike of dentists. Mercer tore through the hierarchy at the Rancid Riders, quickly clinching the coveted top dog spot of president by the early 70s. It was with the Rancid Riders that he earned the nickname Tiny. Heavily tattooed and running out of real estate, he tattooed love and hate on his fists. Of course he did. Now it was time for Mercer to step up to the plate as the head honcho of the Missing Links, and this rowdy biker wasted no time flexing his muscles. Mercer didn't just make a name for himself with his violent streak. Alcohol played a supporting role here. Mercer and his brothers threw epic, wild parties at his crib in Belton. Think meth-fueled shenanigans, group romps with multiple ladies, and booze flowing like there's no tomorrow. Sometimes Mercer and his posse took things up a notch and paid a visit to the local cemetery using iron chains to beat on the famous prohibitionist Carrie Nation's tombstone. Not content with just wreaking havoc at parties and cemeteries, Mercer developed a distaste for liberals and hippies. So he and the Missing Links made it their mission to crash music gigs and political rallies. This dude has no chill, like none. During the Kansas City Republican National Convention in 1976, Mercer and his gang stirred up trouble with a bunch of activists and peace lovers camping out nearby. It makes you wonder if, he found any puppies to kick or babies to take candy from on his way over there. They were showering the cops with beer cans and making unwelcome advances on innocent high school girls attending the protests. When a brave Vietnam vet named John tried to stop their nonsense and protect the young women, Mercer's inner Hulk emerged, and he nearly beat this man to death. Only with intervention from the police and other rallygoers dragging John to safety did he survive. But it gets worse. Unsatisfied with hassling high school girls and hippies, in August of 1974, the Missing Links would be tied to a brutal and gruesome murder of a teenage boy that remains unsolved to this day. Around 12:45 a.m. on August 14, 1974, shortly after George Tiny Mercer had taken over the reins at the Missing Links MC, 15-year-old David Iman was preparing to leave his girlfriend's house in Kansas City. He called up his mama Wanda and he promised that he would be home faster than she could say flapjacks. But David wouldn't make it home. His jaunt down Blue Ridge Boulevard took a very dark turn, leading him straight into a fiery nightmare. In the very early morning hours of August 15th, David's body would be found tied up and charred to a crisp in a ditch. All of Kansas City was left reeling from a murder that still plays hard to solve. From all accounts, David was a friendly and likable young man. He did start having trouble in school and messing around a little bit with the devil's lettuce after his father passed away in a traffic accident in 1971. Poor lamb. It wasn't serious trouble, and he did keep his business to himself, so the cops were stumped. They just had no leads. David had been tied up with a thick rope. His wrists were bound in front of him as well as his feet. It would be something like what you would expect to see at a rodeo, how they tie up steers. And this poor kid, he wasn't shot, he wasn't stabbed or beaten. He died because someone poured a flammable liquid on him and lit him on fire. Horrible. Considering the brutality of the crime, it wasn't long before the rumor mill got started pointing the finger in the direction of the Missing Links. I don't blame anyone for coming to that conclusion, considering that school kids were prime targets for them. Losers. It didn't look like a robbery either, as a stick-up kid generally doesn't tie you up and light you on fire. They just take your stuff and go. Now, the police believe they know who did it. They believe the officer that found the body was the perpetrator, Lieutenant Harry Funston. Yikes. The evidence is slim, though. It seems that Lieutenant Funston had been a first responder to more than any fires than any other officer in the Casey area that year. Now, the fire marshal had been investigating Funston for being an arsonist for some time before David's death. He just couldn't come up with the goods. He was known for being hot-tempered and with a violent streak. The cops were so sure that they had their man that the major case squad spent a whole 9 days investigating the murder. And most of that time was spent interrogating Funston. Although they didn't get a confession, they had not one shred of evidence. No hairs, no fibers, no fingerprints, nothing. But David's case was quickly shelved, and Lieutenant Funston moved out of the area and he started managing a fast food joint in Hutchinson, Kansas. Now, years later, a few officers who had worked with Funston at the time, they refuted all the rumors. They said he was a nice guy that liked to make people laugh. One of them had been pressured into quitting for defending Funston, and he had to go work for another law enforcement agency in another part of Missouri. Personally, I think it's a fairly large leap to go from firebug to actually tying up a kid and lighting them on fire. Funston is sketch, but this was super sloppy police work. When David's younger sister became curious for answers in 2019, she contacted a Casey detective, and he told her that evidence had been being tested every 5 years as technology advanced. Turns out he was lying. All the evidence had been lost sometime in the intervening 45 years, and no one had done any significant work on the case since 1976. Nice. Meanwhile, David's mom, Wanda, had been conducting her own investigation. She searched for answers until the day she died. In 2014, David's younger sister began looking through her mother's notes. Turns out, David had known several Missing Link members. The names Fat Charlie and Snake. They appeared in her notes, but their real names have never been determined. Now, the place where David was found was also known to be a one-stop illicit substance shop, and the Missing Links had that market cornered. The closest house to the area, which was still a fair distance away, the people that lived there said the area was frequented by kooks and weirdos. Now, would a cop commit a murder in an area known for kooks and weirdos? I don't know. Would a cop patrolling an area just littered with kooks and weirdos find a body? For sure. It was also rumored to be the location where the Missing Links dumped a lot of their bodies. That's gross. Dump your bodies, then go hang out there and sell your dope there? Kooky. Now, I thought this was going to be like a 20-minute video that I'd spend a couple days doing some research on. No, I mean, this story was like a spider web. I still don't know how many bodies the Missing Links have attached to them. Quite a few. I mean, it seemed like they had their mangy little fingers in everyone's pie. Now, finally, we're going to fast forward to the drama that unfolded on August 31st, 1978, that caused this terror train to come to a screeching halt. With shaking fingers and a tight feeling in his chest, John Campbell dialed the number of the renowned attorney Sidney Willens. Now, he had to leave a message because Willens was in Florida at that time on a speaking engagement. But 2 days later, when the attorney came back, Campbell had some legit tea to spill. About a month before John Campbell rang up Sidney Willens, Karen Keaton had disappeared. On that hot and steamy August evening, John Campbell had been looking after the daughter of George Mercer, his BFF and head biker in charge of the Missing Links, of which Campbell was a fully patched member. Now, the nickname Tiny was just a play on words. George Clifford Mercer was a behemoth. He was well over 6 feet tall and pushing 300 lbs, and every single bit of him cornbread fed. Big, dumb as a bag of wet hammers, and mean as a snake. And it was his 34th birthday. So the big, dumb, unfortunate-looking George Tiny Mercer and his friends David G. and Stephen Big Bird Gardner were at the Blue 7 Lounge in Grandview, Missouri. They were just vibing in their own creepy way and tossing back some drinks. Then there is slight framed 22-year-old Karen Keaton dressed in a red and yellow flowered dress. She's holding it down as a waitress. And Mercer is throwing out some pretty forward comments about wanting to hook up. So his buddy, Steven Gardner, Big Bird, who knows Karen, heads over to chat her up. So Big Bird gets back to the table. He says he's taking Karen to breakfast, and then they'll meet up with the others at Mercer's house. Now, Karen was young, idealistic, friendly, and trusting. She didn't know that a whole web of shadiness was starting to unfold. So Mercer bounced with David G. back to his place in Belton, Missouri, getting there at about 12:30 a.m. And of course, John Campbell was already there holding down the domestic duties, watching Mercer's 10-year-old daughter. I mean, at least he got a babysitter. You know, this guy is a worthless miscreant, but at least he doesn't leave his kids unattended. Anyway, not long after Mercer and G got home, Gardner and Karen popped by, and things took a really dark turn. Mercer went and grabbed a sawed-off double-barreled shotgun. Flashing the shells, he straight up bopped Karen on the head with the gun, and he started pushing her around, telling her to get her ass upstairs. And when she called out for Gardner to help her, he said, "Happy birthday, Tiny." Then, turning back to the others, he said, "Seconds." Karen probably thought that she was safe with Gardner, that he was her friend. I want to kick his butt so thoroughly and convincingly, they'll make a documentary about it. So as Tiny is dragging Karen up the steps, he pulls off her red and yellow flowered dress and tosses it to Big Bird, along with her purse. Tiny tells Big Bird to handle the clothing situation. So he does. He stashes the clothes away and makes a cash withdrawal from Karen's purse. Classy move, Big Bird. Now, mind you, Mercer's 10-year-old daughter is not only in the house, she's awake in the house. Sweet Jesus. Now, none of this next part is easy to talk about or listen to or even be aware that this thing occurred in a time and place. I'll give the details, but in a vague and watercolory type way as I can. But something happened to Karen, and her story needs to be told. So tap out if you're triggered by this type of violence. I am not trying to hurt anyone. After perpetrating an assault of the sexual nature on Karen, Mercer made his grand appearance downstairs, stark naked. And the truth is revealed on actually why they call him Tiny. I can't be neutral. I just can't. So Tiny, feeling quite proud of himself for dominating a person less than half his size, starts strutting around like a rooster that owns the whole barnyard. Meanwhile, Gardner goes upstairs for a shot at proving his manliness. Just a few minutes later, Big Bird Gardner hollers downstairs for John Campbell and David G. and Mercer to come back upstairs. So these three dingleberries join the fourth dingleberry, and while Karen is lying exposed on the bed, Mercer orders her to undress David G. and perform fellatio. She does. And wanting nothing but the best for his pal, Mercer asks G how Karen was doing. This absolute waste of skin says she's doing okay. Mercer threatens Karen into doing a better job. Ever so conscientious, Mercer follows up with G on the performance, and G answers, "Better now." At this point, Mercer, Campbell, and Gardner go back downstairs to do whatever it is they do after a situation like this. Pitifully, Karen asks what was going to happen to her. G claims he attempted to reassure her. I mean, God, could you imagine? As G goes downstairs, Mercer orders Campbell to go upstairs so that they can all be in this together. Campbell returns to a sobbing Karen. He also attempts to console her and tells her to just do what Mercer says and then he'll let her go. Karen is probably clinging to this hope, but she knows Steven Gardner. She can identify him. Deep down, she probably already knows how this is going to go. Campbell then goes downstairs, and G and Gardner are getting ready to leave. Mercer asks Gardner twice what should be done with Karen. Gardner instructs him to, quote, kill the bitch. Mercer replies with, it'll be done, brother. Then Gardner asks if Mercer would need any help. Mercer indicates that he does not, and he will put the body where it won't be found. Now, Mercer goes back upstairs, and oddly, Campbell goes to sleep. It wasn't long before Campbell gets jolted awake by Mercer hollering his name from upstairs. He hustles up there and sees Mercer all on top of Karen, his hands around her neck. Mercer's going all nuts, yelling at Campbell to check her pulse. Campbell grabs Karen's arm and manages to find a faint pulse. With complete and utter lack of humanity, Mercer strikes Karen on the side of her head and screams, "Die, bitch," while he continued to strangle her. Then Karen's bowels eliminated. Mercer again screeched for Campbell to take her pulse. He didn't find one that time. Mercer grabbed Karen's legs and dragged her to the floor. Mercer took the sheets to the washing machine. Okay, now am I the only one that took this guy as the type that wouldn't even have sheets? Like his grungy ass just slept straight on the mattress. Anyway, Mercer then assigned Campbell the task of cleaning up the mess on the floor. Once the cleanup was done, Mercer casually instructed Campbell to go fetch his ride and pop the tailgate open. Campbell and Mercer then hopped in the truck, with Campbell playing the role of the loyal chauffeur following Mercer's GPS-like directions. They ended up at a desolate spot just over the state line into Kansas, where Mercer ungraciously tossed Karen over a fence and into a field. Now, as Mercer was returning to the truck, he casually remarked if he had done the other one like this, he wouldn't be facing the rape and other charges they had on him. What? Yeah. So about a month before the attack on Karen Keaton, on the sunny afternoon of July 25th, 1978, a 17-year-old firecracker named Debbie Middleton strolled over to her boyfriend, Randall Boyette's house at 7403 East 108th Terrace in Kansas City. She headed over there to kick it with her boyfriend and his two homies, Brian Christopherson and Dean Coates. The latter had been crashing at Randall's pad for a while. So the Fab Four spent the afternoon just hanging out, and come 7 p.m., Randall Boyette and Brian Christopherson bounced to work. So that just left Debbie and Dean at the house just hanging out. Meanwhile, George Mercer was kicking it with his own squad, 4 other members of the Missing Links MC: Russell Pearson, Russ Riley, Bruce Miller, and Charles Headley. So that group of hooligans just spent the afternoon drinking, doing all the substances before they decided to head over to the house at 108th Terrace, as Mercer had known Dean Coates from way back. So they get there in Russell Pearson's van, and they stormed in like they owned the place. Dean Coates and Debbie Middleton were still there, just still hanging out, when they just walked in, and 17-year-old Debbie quickly caught the eye of Mercer. Sensing the vibe turned sour real quick, Dean Coates got skittish. So after just 15 minutes, he dipped. But before he left, he did ask Debbie if she wanted to go with him. But for reasons unknown, she turned him down. So Dean peaced out and left Debbie alone with the 5 bikers. So after Dean Coates made his exit, George Mercer spent no time at all honing in on Debbie Middleton. The 33-year-old biker was giving off some seriously creepy vibes and throwing around really dirty suggestions to the 17-year-old girl. He was asking her if she wanted to go partying with him. No, George, no. So Debbie shut him down. Mercer lost it like a squirrel in a crowded attic, and he's growling at her, "You're coming with me whether you like it or not." That's charming. So after that escalated at lightning speed, Debbie soon found herself in the middle of a hair-pulling, face-slapping ordeal as Mercer was dragging her out towards Russell Pearson's van. And that's crazy. That's crazy. So just in the nick of time, Randall and Brian got back and they stumbled across this chaos. Debbie screaming, help me, they're trying to take me. So Randall and Brian, they jumped in to try to save his girl. So he pushes Mercer and his sweaty pals aside, which props to him, and they take Debbie back inside. But not to be done like that, the 5 bikers trailed the trio right back inside the house, and Mercer was barking orders to Pearson and Miller to block the doors. So Mercer, Riley, and Headley made a beeline right towards Debbie, who was just crying and freaking out, holding on to her boyfriend. Brian, that stud, tried to block Mercer's way. Then Mercer grabbed him by the shirt and just punched him right in the face 3 good solid times. Broke his nose, blood spraying everywhere, all over the walls. So Brian's lying on the floor, and Mercer walks up to him and says, my brother has something for you. So Headley walks over and just starts pummeling poor Brian in the abdomen, and then he pulls out a knife and puts it against Brian's throat. I think I would definitely tell Dean Coates he needs to find a new place to live. So Mercer interjects, he says, wait, and he snatched the knife from Headley's hands and he directed his attention towards Debbie. He said to her, while pointing at this poor bloody Brian on the floor, I want you to see this. This is a model of what is going to happen to you if I catch any heat from the police or anyone else about this. Because this is mild compared to what's going to happen to you. So ever so politely, Mercer asked Randall, hey, you wouldn't mind if I took your old lady out partying, would you? Hilarious. So after beating up and threatening some teenagers, Mercer boasted, even the cops are afraid of me, so don't even think about going to them. Pushing Randall aside, Mercer seized Debbie again and twisted her arm behind her back and drug her back out to the van. But before he left, he had one parting remark. He said to Debbie's terrified boyfriend, remember, if I catch any heat, you're dead. So the 5 bikers, they hauled Debbie into the van and they sped off. Their first pit stop was the Blue 7 Lounge, which was a hotspot for the missing links, to go grab some drinks. And more freakiness piled on top of already really freakiness, Debbie saw Pearson get into a scuffle with another patron in the parking lot. She didn't know what it was about, but Pearson stabbed the man with a boot knife. Then they just left. No big deal. Being the smart girl that she was, Debbie knew these were dangerous individuals who would kill to get their way. So this 17-year-old girl knew she had to tread carefully to avoid any triggers that could cost her her life. So everyone piled back into Pearson's van and they headed out to an isolated field in Cass County, Missouri. Mercer demanded that Debbie take off her clothes and submit to his brothers. So Pearson, Russ Riley, and Bruce Miller all took turns assaulting Debbie, while Charles Headley opted out, I guess all of a sudden feeling uncomfortable with kidnap and assault. Eventually, everyone else but Mercer left, so it was just Debbie and Mercer in this field in the middle of nowhere. Holy cow. I have a feeling that Mercer had originally planned to kill Debbie in that field. Why would they have taken her out that far in the first place? And why would the other 4 just leave Mercer out there? My guess is Tiny wanted to finish her off, but the other 4 got kind of squeamish about it and didn't want to go that far. So they just decided to leave. They'd swing by and pick up Tiny later. And that's what happened. Bruce Miller rolled up in his panel truck to scoop them up. Poor Debbie got shoved into that truck by Mercer, and the creep show continued. So they drove back. They landed at Miller's crib in Kansas City near the junction of 87th Street and Prospect Street, where Debbie was dragged into the house. This time, Miller assaulted her while Mercer played the creepy sidelines. Debbie clung to the hope that if she just went along with it, she might be okay. She might make it out alive, knowing that playing along was her only shot. Now, once Miller was done, he and Mercer shoved Debbie back out to the truck and hauled her back to Randall Boyette's place on East 108th Terrace. There, Mercer reluctantly set Debbie free, but before slinking away, he left her a chilling warning. I'll be digging your grave. Keep quiet if you don't want to end up in it. Poor Debbie, she just broke down in tears. The whole ordeal had left her drained, and Mercer's threats had her petrified. She begged Randall not to call the cops. She did not want the cops involved. But once her mother found out, there was no way she was letting it slide. So her mom called the cops, and soon justice was on the horizon. On August 5th, 1978, Mercer was arrested at his place in Belton, Missouri on a laundry list of charges. Soon after that, Pearson, Miller, Russ Riley, and Charles Headley were also arrested. By August 11th, Mercer was out on $20,000 bond, and he was holed up at home waiting for the trial. But underneath that quiet surface, there was a boiling rage towards Debbie. Pearson, also in a rage, but also very stupid, dropped a cryptic bomb right in the middle of court at his bail hearing. He said if the charges aren't dropped in 2 weeks, that house will go up. And they still gave him bail. I don't know. I think I might have taken that back. Go on now, rascal. I wonder if the judge thought he meant up for sale. Because that's the only thing that I can think of that would make sense here. Dummy. But not just dumb. That threat was chilling. And it would soon be more than just words. Now, there's one more snarl that we have to untangle in this rat's nest before we can finish up Karen's story. The devil's in the details, my darlings. Precisely while Karen Keaton was enduring the horrific ordeal of being violated and then killed, 21-year-old Thomas Schwartz Jr., along with his new bride, Patricia Ann Schwartz, and her 18-month-old daughter, Vanessa Ticknor, were peacefully sleeping in their cozy but cursed rental at 7403 East 108th Terrace. Now, if that address rings a bell, it should. That was the former home of Debbie Middleton's boyfriend, the same house where Debbie was abducted, the very same house one of her attackers and Mercer's co-goon, Russell Pearson, had threatened to burn down if charges surrounding Debbie's ordeal weren't dropped. At 3:47 a.m., Dean Nelson, who had been staying with the Schwartzes, was rudely awakened by some commotion outside. So peeking through sleepy eyes, he saw a shady figure dousing the back door with some flammable liquid and then just lighting it up. And that house went up faster than a crackhead running from the cops. Despite Thomas Schwartz's efforts to save his wife and his stepdaughter, the flames and the smoke just showed no mercy. Patricia and little Vanessa passed away in their sleep. As the smoke settled, it became obvious that this was an arson. Immediately under suspicion were none other than George Mercer and his pack of wolves. Despite the obvious, fear kept the victims silent. It wasn't until a very brave neighbor stepped forward, identifying one Beau Gerard Appleton, some loser hangaround of the missing links, as the arsonist. Soon, Appleton found himself behind bars for the arson, but Mercer and his mangy co-conspirators remained free. Free to quite possibly intimidate witnesses. Authorities had been looking into Karen's disappearance, and witnesses had been coming forward saying that Stephen Gardner had left the Blue 7 Lounge with Karen on August 30th. Gardner did acknowledge that he left the actual building with Karen, and then he took her to breakfast at a Sambo's restaurant on Blue Ridge Boulevard. Then they stopped to get beer. Then they went back to the Blue 7 to drink the beer in the bar parking lot. Okay, I guess maybe Big Bird wanted to save a few bucks. Then he said Karen took off in her own car, which was dumb because her car was still right there, right in the Blue 7's parking lot. But okay, Big Bird, I completely see the resemblance here. All the players were questioned, including Campbell, but no one was talking, at least not at that point. Maybe John's conscience was working on him. Maybe it was Jesus. Or maybe he, or probably someone smarter than him, clearly saw how this whole kidnapping was a sloppy cluster. People saw Big Bird, who had just been with Campbell, leave with Karen. And maybe Tiny and the rest of the missing links didn't really own Kansas City. Maybe the cops really weren't afraid of them. And maybe people were just getting sick of their shit. After Sidney Willens took Campbell's statement, he said to Campbell, "Now you know you could be facing accessory charges." He said he knew, with tears in his eyes. Now, Willens was in a little bit of a tricky situation. He knew that he had a duty to shield his client from physical harm, as well as navigate and help protect him from some of the legal consequences. On the other hand, he had a moral obligation weighing on him to report the discovery of Karen's body and relieve the victim's family of their agonizing weight. So he made the call to the cops and spilled the beans. Next up on his phone a friend list was Ralph Martin, the Jackson County prosecutor, and he was hoping to put in a bid for some witness protection. But Martin couldn't help since the whole shebang went down in Belton, so Cass County had jurisdiction. Willen didn't know Joseph Hamilton, the Cass County prosecutor. To add salt to the wound, the feds chipped in with a big fat 0 for witness protection. To save Campbell from disaster, Willens had to deep dive into his own dough faster than a broke girl at a Gucci sale. Campbell is soon Splitsville, racking up a cool $831 on airfare. Willens was pretty convinced that Hamilton would be happy to use his client's tea to convict Mercer, but not slap any charges on Campbell. And as it turns out, he was right. In September of 1978, Stephen Gardner was arrested in Johnson County, Kansas, for Karen Keaton's murder. A few days later, George Mercer was nabbed and slapped with the same charges. Now, while Mercer's link to Keaton's murder seemed crystal clear, the fiery tale of the arson attack on Middleton's former home proved to be a trickier puzzle to solve. Despite a lot of incriminating evidence pointing to Mercer's orchestration of Bo Appleton's fiery antics, the trial hit a major snag just as it primed for showtime. Smack dab in the middle of jury selection for Appleton's murder trial, lo and behold, the star witness did a complete 180 and recanted her earlier identification as Appleton as the firebug. When that bombshell dropped like bass, the case against Appleton fizzled out like a doused match. After that, the cops then latched onto this wild notion that the arson was narcotics related instead of payback against Debbie Middleton and her boyfriend, but the dirtbags didn't know the house had new tenants. The fiery tragedy that claimed 2 lives is officially unsolved and getting colder by the second. On October 12, 1978, George Mercer was back in court for yet another hearing concerning Middleton's accusations. Mercer's demeanor remained steadfastly defiant as he outpaced the sheriff to make his grand solo entrance into the courthouse. He looks like an 8-year-old deciding it's too embarrassing to hold his mom's hand while crossing the street. If you want to see what total lack of self-awareness looks like, it looks like this. Dude's strutting into court like a peacock and he's facing chomo charges. No one cares, George. No one cares. It was Debbie Middleton, just 17 years old, that handled herself like a boss. She knew about the arson, and she knew that Mercer caught charges for the murder of another woman. Despite the threats, despite this mug staring at her the entire time, she stood her ground like a warrior. She looked right at that grubby ninny hammer, and she told her story. On the same day, they gave Mercer a twofer and shuffled him off to Cass County with Stephen Gardner for the murder of Karen Keaton. There, Mercer and Gardner would face their once reverent brother turned star witness, John Campbell. And if looks could kill. Of course, Mercer and Gardner tried to shift the blame to Campbell and David G., who had also flipped. All for naught, though. They were both hit with capital murder charges and were whisked off to jail, sans bail. So now we're back to Miller and Pearson, as well as Mercer, finally getting sentenced for the kidnap and assault of Debbie Middleton. These dudes are just doing too much. How do they afford all those attorney's fees, and how do they fit all these court appearances into their schedules? So Miller, the one who went back and picked up Mercer and Debbie and then took them back to his house, he got 20 years, while Pearson received a 5-year slap on the wrist. And now Pearson was the one who announced to the court that Debbie's house would go up. Now, Pearson and Miller had both filed for and got changes of venue, each being tried in different counties, Vernon and Bates counties respectively. And those 5 years that Pearson got in Vernon County should make the women of that county feel very safe. Mercer also got a change of venue and ended up in Greene County, where he was sentenced to 30 years. And now that is showing him how it's done, Greene County. What's up? And as fate would have it, Mercer's change of venue in Karen Keaton's case kept him in Greene County. Rolled the dice on that one and shot craps. Yikes. So in August of 1979, George was finally on trial for the brutal murder of Karen Keaton. Prosecutor Joe Hamilton was coming for him. He wanted the death penalty, and he was working for it. In 1979, the U.S. was just getting back into the swing of capital punishment. Just 2 years earlier, after a decade-long moratorium, Gary Gilmore faced the firing squad in Utah. So Joe Hamilton was aiming high in his death sentence pursuits. He's a go-getter. The defense team was led by Zenobio Lozano, who was a pretty well-known public defender. Attorney Nick Fiorello backed him up. They attempted once again to shift the blame to Mercer's former allies, John Campbell and David Gee. John Campbell once again took the hot seat and recounted the nightmare he got tangled up in. He told of being at Mercer's place, looking after the gang leader's daughter, only to witness Stephen Gardner coming in with Karen Keaton, and then the brutal attack that followed. Campbell fought back tears as he testified. Quote, Mercer was on top of Miss Keaton, hands around her neck. He screamed at me, check her pulse. The defense team tried to argue that there was no solid proof that Karen Keaton had even been in the house. No forensic breadcrumbs led back to her. But Campbell testified about how Karen Keaton's bowels had eliminated. A witness for the prosecution said that despite Mercer trying to erase all of that evidence by washing the sheets and scrubbing the bedroom floor, traces of human waste were everywhere in that house. The mother lode being in the bedroom where Campbell claimed Karen suffered her horrific ordeal. They also tried to claim that Karen Keaton had been a junkie and had probably died of a drug overdose. Gross. But Lozano's far-fetched theories didn't hold water, and friends and family of Karen Keaton testified she never touched the stuff. Despite the defense claiming that Mercer's daughter said Karen Keaton never showed up, she flipped the script on the stand and told a completely different story. The now 11-year-old testified seeing her dad and Gardner bring home a blonde lady matching Karen Keaton's description, and witnessing her dad dragging that woman up the stairs, just like Campbell had testified. 11 years old. In the end, the jury took not quite 3 hours to come to a guilty verdict. And not only that, they recommended the death sentence. Joe Hamilton gave Zenobio Lozano a right and proper spanking. Now, I don't love the idea of besmirching Karen's name, especially in front of her loved ones, but Lozano was absolutely committed to saving Mercer's life. Calling the victim a junkie is a cheap shot, and it's low-hanging fruit as far as a defense goes, but Lozano was working his tail off for a client that was unlikable, looked terrifying, and was nearly impossible to defend. It's a shame that all that blood, sweat, and tears went into someone like Mercer. But I suppose it's those like Mercer that need someone like Lozano the most. Mercer was facing the gas chamber, but he was most concerned about his hair. I get it. Claiming that they were part of him, he asked if he could keep his long hair and his beard. They didn't let him. A few weeks past Mercer's death row check-in. It was Stephen Gardner's turn at bat in Boone County, Missouri, after yet another change of venue. Campbell and Gee once again took center stage and testified that Gardner had lured Karen to Mercer's house so he could give her to Tiny as a birthday present, and that he gave Tiny the order to kill her. Bros before hoes, huh? See where that got you. Now, of course, Mercer sucks, but by all accounts, Gardner knew Karen, and by some accounts they were dating, at least talking. There was only one man she could trust that night, the man who set her up for this. That's her friend, her only friend. He took her to breakfast, gave her roses, and then led her to her death. I hate that dude, but so does Boone County. The jury came back with a guilty verdict. And after hearing this, Gardner's mom rushed over to him, hugged her son, and fainted on the defense table. While the jury didn't give him the death penalty, they gave him life without parole for 50 years. It was later reduced to life without parole for 30 years on a technicality. With zero fanfare, Stephen Gardner was paroled in 2023 after serving 45 years. He's 70-ish now and went to prison at about age 25. Now, of course, none of that brings Karen back, but Stephen Gardner's life was ruined by his own hands. I'm sure, if not remorse, then regret has haunted this jackal for most of his pathetic life. I'm sure his mom is no longer there for him, and the only gang he's joining is AARP. And you know what they say?
Well, sometimes that is better.
The vacuum left by Mercer's absence, and I guess no one ready to step into a management position, not to mention all the bad press, the Missing Links Motorcycle Club began to crumble like a week-old cookie. The group splintered into 3 rival factions, none of them really able to hang on to their own slice of the drug-trafficking Kansas City pie. The Galloping Goose MC and the El Forastero MC, they tapped in to snatch the crown from the struggling Missing Links. In 1981, a rival gang ransacked and burned down the Missing Links clubhouse. Now, don't go looking on eBay for any Missing Links memorabilia, because everything with the Missing Links logo on it was destroyed. That was a crushing, yet symbolic blow. The Missing Links imploded. Some joined the much larger Outlaws MC for protection. Now, they shouldn't have been hassling those high school girls, because they would have been excellent in that capacity. The Missing Links would never recover after being branded bitches. They were officially deader than fried chicken. And speaking of dead, George Tiny Mercer slid onto Missouri's death row in 1979, becoming just the second resident. Unfortunately, it wouldn't take too long to fill that cell block up. About a month after his arrival, Mercer found himself sharing his deepest thoughts with a pack of reporters and fellow inmate Rayfield Newland, who had shot a convenience store clerk but forgot to take the money. The once hairy and burly biker with the BA attitude was now clean-cut and whiny as a rusty hinge. Mercer complained to reporters, quote, "You just exist in a place like this. They've taken away my identity. All they can do now is execute me," end quote. From his lips to God's ears. He blamed government persecution of outlaw bikers for the situation that he found himself in. So persecuted. Never once did that sniveling little maggot take any responsibility for his crimes. And he wasn't smart enough to realize that the star witnesses against him were also bikers. The government didn't persecute them or prosecute them. Winebag. Now, the Missouri State Pen in Jefferson City, which is closed now, was pretty bad. It was really old and not well maintained. Death row inmates were housed in the basement with the rats and the roaches. It would get so hot and humid in the summer that it would rain indoors. And in the winter, they would have to chip away ice from the toilet before they could use it. That's pretty bad. I get a little bit of whining, but when you've done the things that Mercer has done, don't expect a lot of sympathy. And the Missouri Supreme Court didn't give him much sympathy. They shut down his first round of appeals in 1981 in a snap and set an execution date for November 30th, 1981, which Mercer promptly put the brakes on with a fresh round of appeals. Also in 1981, Mercer became a jailhouse Jesus. The guy who once thrived on violence and intimidation swapped that for Bible verses and prayer. I'll bet. Amidst all the religious fervor, and pity he didn't find Jesus much sooner, but he did find Christy Angel. Angel had done a stint on drug charges, so they had a little bit in common, and through letters, the two fell head over heels in love. Still though, Christy? Gross. Mercer also developed a close friendship with the incompetent hitman A.J. Bannister. The two bonded over their love for the movie Road Warrior. That's nice. Bannister gained some fame in the 90s due to a book followed up by a documentary by British author Stephen Trombley. And oh my god, they were terrible. Terrible. This was no Paradise Lost. totally overdramatic and breathless. He wrote things like, "I silently willed this guard to look at me, and the victim's family stared daggers at me as they silently willed me to look at them." And in reality, these people didn't know who the hell this guy was. Still though, Old Bannister became a hit in the UK. He even got a nice English lady to marry him. If you want to learn more about seemingly normal people that go bananas over vicious killers, have a look-see at that video right there. You'll love it, I swear. Anyway, Mercer married his true love, Christy Angel, after she was released from jail in late 1981. Now, despite finding a wife and the Lord, Mercer still played the blame game. He insisted on blaming everyone and everything for Karen Keaton's murder except himself. Classic deflection. But again, Tiny, no one cares. No one. Over the years, there would be a lot of appeals and general bitching from Mercer, but that execution ghost was always looming over his head. On October 11th, 1988, Tiny's final appeals were denied by the U.S. Supreme Court, and an execution date was scheduled for October 20th, 1988 at 12:01 a.m., and this time, that deadline was legit. But Missouri had a problem. Seems as if the gas chamber at the ramshackle Missouri State Pen had sprung a leak. Warden William Armentrout, not wanting to gas the entire prison population, found a literal solution in skilled but controversial engineer Fred Luchter to whip up a custom machine to facilitate lethal injections. To accommodate Luchter's lethal injection system, the gas chamber at Missouri State Pen underwent modifications, and Luchter himself arrived to oversee the installation of his device. Now that is a DIY project. So Mercer was going to be the first to be put to death with Luchter's machine, so he had questions. Mercer asked Warden Armentrout if he could speak with Fred Luchter, and Luchter agreed. Cut to Mercer finally facing his fears, and he asked Luchter if it was going to hurt. Poor Tiny was sweating bullets. Luchter assured him that it wouldn't, and it would just be like going to sleep. Yeah, right. Later, Luchter would say how he was struck by Mercer's demeanor and just the fear on his face. He said that Mercer had gone soft and flabby. I guess prison really wasn't doing him any favors. That big burly biker with all that violence and intimidation was long gone. When October 20th, 1988 arrived, Mercer lucked out with a last-minute save. A 3-panel judge from Missouri's 8th Circuit Court of Appeals granted him a last-minute stay, and we're talking just minutes before the event. However, on December 20th, 1988, that same panel of judges yanked Mercer right back into the hot seat, faster than you can say potassium chloride. After the Missouri Supreme Court shut down Mercer's appeals, on January 4th, 1989, a new execution date was set. Not wanting to dilly-dally, they set it for 2 days later on January 6th, 1989. 2 days. Not that I'm feeling particularly soft towards Tiny, but it would be really chilling to hear that you only have 2 days to live. I mean, it rattles the soul. Facing the end and having limited options, Tiny could have asked the governor of Missouri for clemency. But in a fairly unprecedented move, then Governor John Ashcroft actually denied clemency before the guy even had a chance to ask for it. Dang, he wasn't having it. On January 5th, 1989, Tiny said goodbye to his fellow death row inmates before being transferred to a holding cell just a short distance from the death chamber. During his final hours, Tiny read his Bible and flipped through some motorcycle magazines. He had some heartfelt conversations with his wife, and he reminisced with a close friend from his outlaw biker days. Mercer proudly displayed the large Harley-Davidson tattoo on his back as he and his friend shared their unforgettable moments on their motorcycles out on the open road. I don't think I would ever get a tattoo of a company name and logo. I mean, I live and die for Oreos, but I'm not going to get a neck tattoo of a big cookie. For his last meal, Mercer requested barbecued steak and ribs, French fried potatoes, a burrito, several tacos, and a large soda. Now, unable to finish the burrito, he offered it to Warden Armentrout. And would you take it? I mean, I don't know. Burritos are delicious, but I don't know if I could just eat somebody's last one. Last one ever. I don't know. Mercer's legal team had filed a last-minute Hail Mary to the U.S. Supreme Court for a stay of execution. They knew the chances were slim, and sure enough, the Supreme Court brought the hammer down on his final appeal. Nope, not getting away this time, buddy. Warden Armentrout had later said that Tiny appeared shocked by the news. I mean, it's no news that anyone wants to get, but it's not surprising. At 11:40 p.m. on January 6, 1989, Mercer took his final steps from his holding cell. Having spent a decade on death row, Mercer had formed a deep connection with Warden Armentrout. He saw him not just as an authority figure, but as a close friend. You do you, Warden Armentrout. So before heading to the nearby death chamber, Mercer gave Armentrout a hug and a handshake. He asked the warden to, quote, look after my shipmates for me, end quote. Then he walked toward the altered gas chamber, prepared for the lethal injection. Mercer had asked to wear his leather biker jacket with the missing links patch on the back. It was a request that would not be granted. And thank God. I mean, a homeboy just spent a decade trying to get everyone to believe that he had hung up his patch years before Karen's murder. Shut up. I guess he and Armentrout weren't that tight after all. In two adjacent rooms, a small group of 12 witnesses, including Christy Mercer, her friend, and a handful of reporters, waited somberly for showtime. At 12:01 a.m., the plastic window shades were yanked up, exposing Mercer to the witnesses. The condemned man, looking visibly agitated and anxious, was strapped down on a gurney, and he was covered up to his neck with a stark white sheet. Now, because of Tiny's history with drug use, the veins in his arms were shot, making them useless for the IVs. So they were inserted into his groin instead. Tiny scanned the room looking for Christy. He found her, smiled at her, and he tried to speak. She mouthed to him, I can't hear you. So he mouthed back, I love you. And Christy threw up a peace sign in response. Warden Armentrout then read the death warrant, and at 12:03 a.m., two guards simultaneously pressed the buttons on the lethal injection device, setting the whole process into motion. The room fell quiet, except for the mechanical hum of the machine. As the sodium thiopentanol coursed through Mercer's veins, he yanked his head back against the taut restraints, then gradually relaxed. A minute later, the pink uranium bromide was administered, causing Mercer to cough 3 times and shudder once. He then fell motionless, and his face flushed a crimson red as his breath slowed. At 12:05 a.m., the final dose of potassium chloride intended to stop Mercer's heart was injected, bringing an end to Mercer's journey. Fixing his gaze on a solitary light above, his eyes remained open but unseeing as he drew his final breath. Never one word, not one, about Karen Keaton or the 10 other murders linked to this greaseball and his pack of big, dumb, tweaked out wild jackals. Never one word about Debbie Middleton or the countless other high school girls he traumatized. All he could ever talk about was himself and his suffering. He assaulted a woman at gunpoint and then murdered her while his daughter was in the house and was aware of what was happening. Although this case is relatively obscure now, Tiny's mug was plastered on the front page of papers from KC to St. Louis on the reg, and in every single interview, it was poor me, while the entirety of Karen Keaton was reduced to blonde cocktail waitress. The man could barely string one coherent sentence together, but he was given a fairly significant platform for 10 years. I'm not pro or anti-death penalty. It's the law in Missouri. I'll leave it at that. But I am firmly anti-George Tiny Mercer. In the days that followed, Mercer was laid to rest in the quiet town of Nevada, Missouri. A whole gaggle of bikers came to pay their respects. And in true biker tradition, he was buried with his beloved leather jacket and his gang colors. Then it gets weird. It gets weird. Christy Mercer had stayed behind at the Morris Cemetery in Nevada with a shovel and a whole lot of determination. This lady was ready to dig deep. Literally. Her goal? To give her late husband a fashion glow-up in the afterlife. So there she was, at the gravesite, furiously digging like a prairie dog. Obviously, the cops were called, and Deputy Greg Kepler showed up like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? Christy was dead set on slipping a fake fur coat into George's casket. Apparently, she had promised Tiny she would put it in the casket with him. I don't know. Maybe she forgot it or changed her mind and then changed her mind back. I don't know what the coat looked like or what it symbolized or what was going through that woman's head at that moment. I don't want to know. But thankfully, Kepler was able to talk her down, at least for the moment. The next day, Christy returned with a sidekick, and her buddy, once again, digging up a storm at the gravesite. Now this time, not only did she want to put this fake fur coat in the casket, but she actually wanted to dig George up, plop him in the back of a truck, and drive him to Pacific, Missouri, which is a little bit closer to the St. Louis area. I mean, the man was on death row for 10 years. She was married to him since 1981. She didn't have time to plan this out. Deputy Kepler again stepped in, telling her it was time to let George rest in peace. Now, she had gotten further when she had a little help, and the deputy could see the white plasterboard coffin, which had to be one of the craziest things he's ever seen in his life. Girl, I get it. I get grief. But try to get your closure with a little less drama and without a shovel. Authorities did refill the hole, but not before Christy was able to leave the fake fur coat on the casket. Good enough. We have only one loose end to tie up. The arson and the murder of Patricia Swartz and her daughter Vanessa Ticknor had never been solved. Now that was mainly because the only eyewitness that had been willing to come forward later recanted. But in 2013, karma came knocking. Or rather, a SWAT team did, and they didn't knock. The Warrensburg Police Department launched a no-knock raid at 406 9th Street Terrace. They were acting on a warrant to search for illicit substances. The cops busted the door down with a battering ram. Now, in the middle of all this chaos, out of nowhere, a shadowy figure steps up, armed with a double-barreled shotgun. And he's clearly on edge, not really happy the cops are there. Did he listen to the warnings? Nah. He just popped a shot off, which left a big hole in the door right behind the cops. It was like a scene out of Pulp Fiction. The officer unleashes hell with a .40 caliber UMP submachine gun. I'm not even sure what that is, but it sounds horrifying. The 57-year-old man is hit with 5 shots and killed instantly. And I'm sure by now you know who that was. Yep, it was our boy, Bo Gerard Appleton. Firebug and killer. In the intervening years, Appleton had managed to tie the knot and had a couple of daughters, but he was unable to shake his criminal inclinations. Outlaw motorcycle clubs are an institution. They've been around forever, ingrained in American life. You got your Hells Angels, a little bit shady, but people still love them. Vets find purpose and brotherhood with these clubs after that military buzz wears off. Imagine coming back from a war and just feeling lost, and then boom, you're part of a tight-knit crew living free on the open road. And a lot of these bikers are out there doing really good things. Charity runs, raising cash, shining light on issues that need our attention. But then you have Tiny Mercer, taking over the Missing Links MC and turning it into a full-on criminal circus. Under his watch, it went from a chill hangout to a den of crimes, drugs, heists, murder, you name it. A lot of credit is given to John Campbell for being the hero of this story. And I don't know, I don't think any of us will ever really know. Was he motivated by his conscience, or as rumors say, his well-off mother that knew he would eventually get busted, so he might as well get ahead of it. Then she got him a high-priced attorney who got him a sweet, sweet deal. His own daughter has made some serious accusations, if you know what I mean, and his neighbors say he's a sack of garbage. Maybe the truth is somewhere in between. He did do a hard and dangerous thing, but a capital murder conviction would have been harder and more dangerous. I think I'd rather hit Splitsville and assume a new identity than even do the 45 years Stephen Gardner did. I think the cops would have eventually solved Karen's murder. It's possible the road crew that Sidney Willens approached for help would have found her. They weren't far off. Then you have the eyewitnesses that saw Karen leave with Stephen Gardner, and that could quite possibly have led to a warrant, which would have led to the forensic evidence found in Mercer's home. I'm going to stay neutral on John Campbell. I'm like Switzerland because I get mob mentality. I get peer pressure. I get that teeny tiny Mercer was the president of their little motorcycle circle jerk. What I don't get is unnecessary cruelty, humiliation, and violence against someone who has done you no harm. And I don't know if I would have done anything to stop it because obviously Mercer was armed and he's not the kind of person you reason with. My mind probably would have been on my own survival too. But I can say that I would have left the second I had a chance. I would have called somebody, whether it be the cops or a motorcycle elder if they have those, who could explain to these knuckleheads that maybe their little criminal enterprise on wheels doesn't need the heat of a murder investigation. But there I go, expecting people like this to have any decent sense beyond being really good at smoking meth. John Campbell chose to stay, and then he helped dispose of a body. But he did come clean, though his motivation for doing so will probably always be uncertain. It was the right thing to do, whether it was for Karen's sake or his own. Be cool to yourself, be cool to others. Ride or die shouldn't mean covering up a murder. It's okay to break the cycle because I do care about what happens to you. Bye.
Yo!